sur le cultivé des grains patrimoniaux. Welcome to today's webinar on growing heritage grains. Nous allons commencer avec quelques détails sur la traduction simultanée. We're just going to get started with some information about the simultaneous translation.
Donc, pour écouter l'interprétation simultanée en français, tout le webinaire sera traduit en français. Vous n'avez, dans quelques instants, en fait, pas tout de suite, mais dans quelques instants, vous allez voir apparaître au bas de l'écran une icône en forme de globe avec le mot interprétation. Vous cliquez dessus et vous choisissez le français et vous allez pouvoir l'écouter en français.
So for this webinar this year, we're providing some simultaneous translation to allow folks to listen in the language of their choice. You can do this by selecting the language interpretation option in the setting bar, and you'll see a little globe that you'll be able to click English or French. And I think, has that popped up, Rebecca?
It has.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for coming here. While we were meeting virtually today, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home, the land we live on, work with, and plant our seeds into. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Indigenous people that call this land home. Today, I'm joining this webinar from my home office on Treaty 6 land, which spans across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. I live in a community just outside of Edmonton, where I'm neighbors with the Alexander Cree, Alexis Nakota Sioux, Enoch Cree, and Paul. As part of understanding and connecting with the land that we're on, I encourage you to learn about the history of the land you're in relationship with by visiting these two links that Rebecca is going to throw into the chat. The first one's called Whose Land, and the second one called Native Land. And also feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and where you're joining us from. One of the strengths of the seed community is how incredible it is that presenters at events and gatherings are so open in sharing their knowledge and, to be honest, with their personal seed stories. With that in mind, I want to mention that the goal for this event is to create a safer space. In order to do this, I'd like to share some community commitments for this webinar. So to begin, it's great to be curious, open, and respectful. We're always learning and growing. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. We do our best. Mistakes are okay, acknowledge, apologize, and keep learning, ask for help, and offer help whenever we can. Make sure to take care of yourselves, take a break if you need to. Think about that, navigating that idea of impact versus intent. If you're usually someone who's quiet, challenge yourself to take more space. And if you usually talk a lot, be mindful to leave room for quieter voices. Avoid excessive jargon, acronyms, and industry language. If there's an acronym or something that comes up in the chat that you don't, or comes up in the presentations and you don't know it, you're probably not the only one. So feel free to message one of us anonymously or ask in the chat and someone can help you out. And lastly, confidentiality. What's learned here leaves here. What's shared here stays here. So please reach out if you have concerns or ideas about how we can do this better. You can private message me or follow up after the event. It is our role to make sure that everyone feels safe, and our team is committed to acting in support of this. So here are some ways you can engage and connect during this event. We've built in a lot of question and answer time, so feel free to take advantage of that and ask your questions or get some feedback on some ideas that you want to add to your farm. So the first way to engage is to introduce yourself in the chat. We love hearing your name and where you're calling in from. You can choose to have your video on or off. And if you're comfortable, you can feel free to change your display name. You can do that in your little box. There's 3 dots in the right-hand corner, and there should be a button that says rename. I'll ask you to stay muted when you're not speaking, just so there's no background noise. And there are 2 ways you can ask questions or engage with folks here. So the first is by using the chat, and there's a chat button on the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. I'll read your name along with your question. But if you'd like to ask your question anonymously, feel free to send me a private message. You can also raise your hand and then ask your question over video or audio. To do this, click the reactions button and you'll see a raise hand button. This will indicate to me that you have a question. When your question is up, I'll ask you to unmute and you can choose to turn on your audio and video. And again, there's lots of time for questions, so feel free to type your questions when they come to you, even in the middle of our presentation. Rebecca and I will be monitoring the chat and making sure we get to your questions. If you're having any technical difficulties, sometimes it's just simply easy to just turn off your video. It helps with internet stability. If you're having more issues, though, feel free to message Rebecca or I. And again, I'd like to welcome you to the Growing Heritage Grains webinar. I always forget to introduce myself at the beginning, but my name is De'Ara Stokes, and I'm the Prairie Regional Coordinator with the Bata Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security. We have our technical host here, Rebecca Ivanoff, who's the Seed Program Manager at the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario. She's also the Ontario Coordinator for the Bata Initiative, and we're both happy to answer any technical questions that you have in the chat. How today will work is we'll start off with Amy Nichol from Adagio Acres, who will talk about the benefits of growing heritage and niche grains and how they market them. After Amy's presentation, there'll be about 10 minutes for questions. And then after that, we'll go on to Samuel Peprah from Mackenzie Applied Research Association to talk us through some of the heritage grains research they're doing in Mackenzie County, Alberta. That again will be followed by 10 minutes of questions. And then we have Chris Whitting from Ironwood Organics, who will share his experience growing heritage grains, agronomy tips, challenges, considerations, and how you can get started. That'll again be followed by 10 minutes of questions. There's a bit of a pattern here. And if there's enough time, we'll bring all our speakers back and you can ask any of your questions for any of the speakers. And again, we've built in a lot of Q&A time, so really feel free to take advantage of that to flesh out your ideas and your questions. So to begin with our first speaker, I will introduce Amy Nichol. Amy has moved well beyond her childhood hatred of bowls of cold, gloopy oatmeal and now considers herself a passionate oat enthusiast. Farming on a small organic farm in the Interlake area of Manitoba since 2011, her farm, Adagio Acres, grows and mills an alternative variety of oats from Manitoba porridge pods. The oats are milled on farm and then sold direct to customers through a grain CSA initiative with other organic farmers, as well as through retail and food service distribution channels. She believes that re-examining our approach to the food we eat can be a powerful way to forge connections between farmers, eaters, and the land that sustains us. And I recently got a bunch of Adagio Acres grain CSAs, and I can't recommend the blueberry oatmeal enough. It's fantastic, so definitely check them out. But without further ado, I will pass it over to Amy.
Hi there. So I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen here again. I know I was well instructed. Is that, can you see my slides then?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm unmuted, everything's good to go. You would think 2 years into the pandemic we'd be good at this, but not so much. So, all right, yeah, well, thanks for inviting me here to speak this evening about our farm story. I started jotting down some notes and thoughts about marketing and farming heritage and niche grains and exploring my own thoughts and experiences. And then a few days ago, I was sent some of the questions that the participants had sent in to the webinar. And I started looking over these questions, really great questions, questions that I'm asking and questions that I don't really have any answers to. But I've got 15 minutes to talk anyways. And from talking with Chris and Samuel just before the presentation, I think you'll get lots of answers later on from the other speakers. But I'm going to talk about my own story. Maybe not so much the how to grow heritage grains, but maybe the why to grow. And hopefully my own story will help to lend some thoughts to your own farm ambitions. So my husband and I started farming about 10 years ago. We quit our teaching jobs in Montreal and moved back to the Interlake here, where my husband had grown up on a horse ranch. We started a family, acquired land and equipment, dissed and tilled up 40 acres that would eventually transition to organic, and we applied for loans. I feel like that small detail is often glossed over when we talk about farming, but it impacted us. Our dream was to make local food more accessible here in Manitoba, this incredible province with abundant grain crops, but also a culture of running into box stores to grab whatever's on sale. When we wrote out our business plan to apply for funding, we were pretty conscious of trying to fit within the metrics that could be considered normal and potentially even financially viable, although that might have been a stretch. We decided to grow an ancient grain version of oats called hulless oats. I'm going to switch slides here. Oh, no, I won't. There we go. So there's a couple of reasons why we chose hulless oats as kind of the one crop to get started with. We were going to be farming on pretty marginal land, lots of rocks and a pretty short growing season. We still have a foot of snow on the ground now. There's thin clay soils, but oats are okay with reasonable abuse. My husband's family had grown oats to feed to their horses in the past, so we knew that it could do reasonably well. But when we stumbled upon hulless oats, we saw that they offered quite a few other advantages as well. In pre-industrial agriculture, a farmer would often grow two types of oats. They would grow hulless oats to feed their families and hulled oats to feed to their livestock. The conventional or the hulled oats would produce much greater yields, and the horses and cows could chew through the hulls that are on the oats. But we don't have the same type of teeth that they do. And so you would grow a smaller patch of hulless oats for human consumption. They don't need to be processed as much when you're milling them. They're shelf stable and generally mostly hull-less. Most of the hulls come off in the field. When they are dehulled, you're dealing with maybe 5% of the oats keeping their hulls on it compared to all of them. Conventional oats are steamed and heat treated in the milling process. And in pre-industrial agriculture, that's not only difficult, but impossible. But in the 1800s, hulless oats were primarily abandoned. People stopped growing them. But we like the idea of having something that would be less energy intensive, less carbon in the processing, and much less expensive to get started with. But when we wrote up our business plan, we usually skimmed over the part about a weird oat variety. It was hard enough to convince a bank that we could be real farmers with less than 100 acres. And if we started talking about ancient grains, I think the conversation would have been over really quickly. So we started farming based on what seemed most believable to lending agencies and an easy sell to consumers. As a mom and someone who is spending a lot of time in the kitchen, I know that I can use 100 pounds of oats relatively quickly. And that's one of the most common grains that I would be using. So I thought that seemed like a good place to start. The fact that the type of oats that we started growing as an ancient grain version was maybe coincidental, but we also reveled in the fact that we were growing food from undervalued and uncommon crops. We tested out 3 or 4 different varieties of naked oats, and one of our absolute favorites exists on our farm, and from the best that we know, about half a pound in a small mason jar of seeds in a university lab. So when you're growing less conventional crops, it's quite common to come across varieties and sub-varieties that are almost unknown anywhere else. So in addition to growing the oats, then we started milling as well. So we bought a lot of equipment that would be used for milling the grains. A lot of this equipment is common on many other farms and seed cleaning plants. So we have graders, screen cleaners, indents, gravity tables. And these things are really common on seed cleaning plants, kind of in a lot of small farms will have kind of those basic seed cleaning pieces of equipment. We also acquired some additional pieces of equipment that are kind of best suited for naked oats. So we have a dehuller to get rid of that last 5 or 10% of hulls, a gravity table, an optical sorter, which uses visible and infrared spectrum to be able to detect a different color and features of the grains that we're sorting. And then roller mills, steel cutters, aspirators that we built ourselves, and packagers, and lots of duct tape. You can see from the top picture, generally we would like to say that our equipment is connected with augers, and but there's times when we lift up one machine on top of the other with a skid steer or a forklift and kind of just hobble things together with lots of duct tape. My kids can't be blamed for thinking that grain milling meant a lot of duct tape and baling twine to kind of keep everything together. There's a bit of rotating door of equipment in and out as we try out new things. Some that work, some that don't, passing on equipment when it doesn't work, going over to farm auctions and finding something new when we need something different. So after about 5 years of growing hulless or naked oats, we were growing about 60 to 100 acres of naked oats each year and selling to about 50 or 60 grocery stores in Manitoba, to restaurants, and a little bit direct to consumer through our website store. but we were a little bit dissatisfied about what we were doing. We'd been farming for 5 or 6 years, and we had experienced the good and bad of farming. Maybe not the idyllic Adagio that we were hoping for. Adagio means a slow tempo, but there's learning opportunities. It was farming kind of in its most quintessential: droughts, floods, mistakes, ruined crops, off-farm jobs to pay the bills, and some really wonderful moments of connecting with consumers and seeing ourselves and our children learn what a connection to place really means. But after about 6 years of farming, milling oats, developing our food company, we were also feeling really uncertain. It seemed like opportunities to grow and develop our business were presenting themselves geographically. But the further away we sold our products in Alberta or BC, the more we were straying from our original goal of building local food access. The more oats we sold in BC or Alberta, the more we were just competing with other small-scale organic mills in other parts of Canada. We needed to continue to expand to be able to pay off our loan for our milling equipment, but we didn't want to stop on other farmers' toes in the process. We took road trips out west to help promote sales through our distributors in Alberta and British Columbia, but our hearts weren't in it, and I felt unsettled about the direction we were going in. I wanted to dive deeper into the world of niche crops, food experiments, and heritage grains, but I didn't know what that would look like. There certainly wasn't a business case for heading in that direction. Ironically, perhaps, I think it was my husband taking a job promotion with his off-farm job that gave us a bit of financial security to dive into something more precarious. That year, about 4 years ago now, I was harvesting one of our fields of oats, and the predominant understory of weeds in that particular field was lamb's quarter. As I was starting to move the oats into a grain bin to store for the winter, we were screening out all of the lamb's quarter. And I was impressed by how much lamb's quarter there was. It smelled really nice, really kind of spinachy. And it seemed like a pity to just throw it all into the compost pile or feed it to the neighbor's cows. I pulled up the tape again and some old window screen to fit over one of the screens in my seed cleaner, and I bucketed the lamb's quarter through the air screen cleaner. When I was done cleaning out the other weeds and the dust and the chaff, I had a few 100 pounds of lamb's quarter seed. It was pretty cool. It tasted really good, actually. I posted about my experiment on Facebook, and an Indigenous elder replied that she would love to have a few pounds to make tortillas with. I was really excited to have new food on my hands. I dropped off samples at the most adventurous restaurants that I knew. I tried to convince all my friends to try eating lamb's quarter, and I dove into archaeological food records. I was intrigued by reports of lamb's quarter seeds being used in ancient Egypt and pre-contact North America. And I really dove into kind of the food history of some of the plants that grow naturally here. But I didn't exactly sell any lamb's quarter. I knew from our previous 6 years of milling that having a crop and having a retailable food product are two very different things. You need to develop CFIA compliant labels, nutrition facts, GS1 barcodes, print packages, undergo shelf life testing, submit products for listing approval with grocery stores, vie for shelf space. And all of that would have to happen before the real work of convincing people to purchase and eat my products. The more obscure a crop is, the less likely this is to be successful. This is perhaps the quandary of niche crops. There's a whole industrial food system stacked up against you. That same fall, a farmer friend called and asked if I could do something with his flax. He had a really small quantity, maybe 5,000 pounds that he had harvested, and the vast majority of that maybe 10,000 pounds was thistle seeds and wild oats. None of the flax buyers could be bothered with such a small quantity with such a high screening rate. It wasn't anything super special or unique, just brown sorrel flax. But wheels were turning, and I could see in the flax the same dilemma that I faced with my lamb's quarter. Our society needs to learn to value food, even when it doesn't meet the normal story of what food is supposed to look like. I knew that I wanted to be doing something different with farming, something that helped to foster a deeper connection to the story of each individual crop, and to help consumers to give that food as much value as it deserved. So a few weeks later, I picked up the phone and I opened up the Manitoba Organic Farm Directory. I called a whole bunch of farmers that I'd never spoken to, just random strangers. And everyone that I called told me stories about crops that they valued, but that were unmarketable. Lentils that were a beautiful crop of lentils, but when the farmer went to sell them, there was about 5,000 or 6,000 pounds after filling the semi-truck, because the lentils were being sold to Europe, that 5,000 or 6,000 pounds had nowhere to go. It was too small to sell elsewhere. Beans with imperfect specks, too many that were broken in half, or black beans mixed with 1% navy beans, but because the size is so similar, buyers don't want to have that intermixed. Food that's perfectly good or niche grains without developed distribution channels. I figured that with the seed cleaning equipment that I had for my oats, I could probably make something work. As I ventured further into this idea, I connected with some of the other farmers I know around Manitoba who are growing specialty crops like quinoa, emmer, einkorn, camelina. They were all trying to do the same thing as I was doing with my oats, trying to eke out a narrow survival in the retail world. But it's really difficult to grab consumers' attention on a store shelf when you're presenting something strange and unknown. And their struggles with marketing mirrored my own. So that winter, I hobbled together Manitoba's first grain CSA. I compiled bundles of crops from our own fields, oats and lamb's quarter, of course, and then some of the odds and ends that other farmers had, French green lentils, black beans, cornmeal, flax, and grains from some other farmers who were doing some on-farm processing. Camelina and sunflower oil. Oh, I got a new slide here, I think. There's some of it. Camelina, sunflower oil, hemp seeds, quinoa, clover seeds for sprouting, yellow peas, popcorn. Each of these items placed by itself would have a really hard time generating interest from consumers. You might be really interested in trying out locally grown popcorn, but sourcing out individual food products from one farmer is kind of crazy making. How many phone calls can you really justify for a pound or two of popcorn? But bundled together, Manitoba Organic Farms can fill a person's pantry with a winter supply of local food. We had 200 people sign up for a grain CSA that first year, which isn't a huge number of people, but sending each person home with about 80 pounds of food, it came out to nearly 20,000 pounds. From there, we've grown to about 400 people signed up each winter, and we've expanded to about 20 different grains, pulses, flours, and oils each bundle. Compared with my original experience of 13 emails to give away 4 pounds of lamb's quarter seed, it seems reasonably successful. It has allowed our farm to double our sales, but shrink geographically. We've let go of our customers in Western Canada and increased the diversity of crops that we work with. Ironically, perhaps an important part of the structure of our grain CSA is that we don't give consumers a whole ton of choice. Most people are comfortable using oats, wheat flour, and lentils, but if they sign up for a bundle, they're also going to get desi chickpeas, einkorn flour, hemp seeds, or clover seeds to try out. And the experimentation that comes from our grain CSA is pretty incredible. I've stolen these pictures from Instagram. Lamb's quarter seed has an Instagram hashtag, and nearly half the posts come from Manitoba, with photos of lamb's quarter seed cupcakes with wild grape icing. That's the beautiful cupcakes in the top corner. Oat rice saute sprinkled with lamb's quarter and hemp seed, and crackers. The customers that sign up for our grain bundles commit to eating locally as a substantial part of their diet, rather than just wandering through a farmer's market like farm tourists. They know that when they sign up, they'll get a lot of food, but they don't exactly know the details. Some years an item will be added at the last minute, like when I found the farmer with chickpeas in December and cleaned them up in a few weeks. Or some items will be taken away if the harvest doesn't go as well as planned. And because of this structure, there's a lot of potential for heritage grains, experimental crops, and smaller harvests to play a role. In the industrial food world, 20,000 pounds isn't really enough to look at. But in a grain CSA model, 300 pounds of popcorn is a valuable commodity. Our grain CSA has operated with one pickup day in mid-January. Before COVID, everything was brought in bulk bags to a central location in Winnipeg, where customers would come with armloads of jars, containers, and Ziploc bags. This zero waste structure makes people think about the waste inherent in our food system, and it's also a wonderful excuse to bring farmers into the space as well to help portion and scoop out everyone's products. So on our pickup days, we'll have maybe 10 or 15 farmers helping to scoop out all the products and all the customers coming into that space as well to get their food. It's opportunities for the farmers to connect with each other and for eaters to meet the farmers and start to understand their perspectives, their hopes and their struggles. So that's where our farm story has brought us to. We operate both in the retail world of distributors and UBC codes with our oat products, but our heart lies in the zero waste direct-to-consumer model for our grain CSA. We're continuing to evolve and change, looking out for how we can increase the diversity of food that we can source locally, experimenting with maybe even growing a few heritage grains, nothing successful. And always looking to how we can help incubate small farmers to explore growing and processing uncommon crops. And I think that's probably about it for what I have to say here anyways, but there'll hopefully lots of time for questions, and moving on to the other presenters who have some actual real content and help for actually growing some of this amazing food.
This is fantastic. Thank you, Amy. It's really, I think this is the perfect way to like start off this webinar and get this story of like the diversity of grains and building relationships to communities, and so creative that people are being with lamb's quarters. So thank you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat, or again, you can use that raise hand function. You just click reactions and then raise hand, and you can ask your question to Amy out loud. Maybe while people are typing in the chat, I was just curious, Amy, if you could share with us a little bit how you built those relationships with different restaurants and retailers.
Yeah, there's a lot of hard work. There's no easy stories in that one. With retailers, we would often be told right off the bat if we walked into the store and talked to the manager that they can't put anything on their shelf that's not approved by, you know, Sobeys Canada or Safeway West or that type of thing. And so we would be kind of, you know, asked to leave the first time we went to go meet with someone. But we'd go back and talk to them a little bit more and maybe point out an empty space on their shelf, or bring in, you know, a display or something. Say, you don't need space on your shelf. You can just put space here in the corner, right next to the, you know, the zucchini or wherever. Right. So, and then after that, you know, try to do some demos in the store to help make the managers happy with you. And eventually, if you smile a lot, maybe they'll give you space on the shelf next to, next to the Quaker Oats. And then your products will be taken down the next time that there's like a regional rep coming through and surveying the shelves and making sure everything lines up with the planograms. But after a couple of years of doing that, we were able to apply for listing with kind of Sobeys and co-ops, and present a few different store managers that were happy with our product. And sometimes those listings have been approved and sometimes not approved. But that's kind of a foot in the door to getting some retail products on the store shelves. It's all about relationships in the end. I mean, it is a food product, it's an industrial system, but even when there's rules and regulations, store managers and shelf stockers are still just people, and they want to connect with people as well. So I think trying to find a way around some of the regulations, not the regulations, we're following the kind of the food safety regulations, but the normal channels of doing things is often kind of what you need to do if you're a small scale producer.
For sure, thank you. We have a few comments in the chat saying just how amazing and innovative you are, and Jackie saying that you're an incredible storyteller, and wondering how you market CSA to folks.
Yeah, so mostly just social media. So I've got a Facebook page and tell people, which crops are out there. I try to keep active, throughout the year, letting people see some of the stories that other farmers are experiencing. So when a farmer is harvesting a crop or when they're planting, posting pictures about that, trying to keep information flowing about what foods are being grown here. But really, I'm just relying on social media as my marketing and connection medium. And I've set up my website to be able to sell our grain bundles that way as well. So yeah, I think a lot of word of mouth, and it really doesn't take that many people. Kind of when if you're looking at small scale farming, 1,000 pounds of a product is quite a lot. And if you give everyone 2 or 3 pounds, I would say, to have 200 or 300 people sign up for something that's kind of word of mouth and friends of friends. And that's not crazy hard to reach that far. So.
Any other questions from folks either in the chat, or if you want to ask your question out loud to Amy by raising your hand? Could you tell us a little bit about how your, where you sourced your seed equipment from? Did you start off with just one seed equipment and it gradually increased, or were there's kind of key ones that you got at the beginning?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, we thought we could get away with outsourcing the seed cleaning side of things, actually. So we bought a roller mill. It was maybe $3,000, and we set it up in a small room, maybe 20 by 15 square feet. Just set up just a roller mill, and we started calling seed cleaning plants to see if they would be able to clean our oats. So we had about 20,000 pounds that we harvested that first year. And I called probably 30 different seed cleaners and asked if they would be able to clean our very small, modest amount of oats. And most of them said, 20,000 pounds, by the time it gets in the augers into one side of our seed cleaning plant, it's already, it'll be coming out the other side. And, we won't even have time to calibrate our equipment. That's just too small of a batch to be able to run through. And so we thought 20,000 pounds is more than we could imagine selling in a year in our wildest dreams starting up. And at that point, we weren't even organic. So we weren't asking people to sign organic affidavits. We were just in transitional stage. And so after that first year, I smiled a lot and cried a lot and finally found one person who agreed to clean our batch of naked oats in his seed cleaning equipment at plant. And then we brought it back just to run through a roller mill. But we knew we couldn't do that every year. There would be no one who would be willing to do small batch cleaning for us here in Manitoba. Particularly as we transitioned to organic. So we started hobbling together our own pieces of equipment. We hoped that we would be able to start with just a screen cleaner, an air screen cleaner. So that's the first piece of equipment that we bought. We soon discovered that we needed something to sort by length as well. So we got some the Carter discs that are now at Chris's place. And then moving from there, we found out that 99.9% purity sounds really good. So if you've got 99.9% of your what you're looking at is oats and the other 0.1% is not oats, that's still a hull or a weed in almost every single bite of oatmeal. So 99.9 sounds really good, but it's maybe not really good enough, especially for an oat where you're seeing all the flakes. If you have a bug left in it and you just flatten that bug, it still looks like a bug. So you need to get everything out. And so we, over the next maybe 3 or 4 years, every year we'd invest in another piece of equipment. And we did get some funding from the government to help us buy our optical sorter as well, which was kind of the final piece of being able to get the oats to the type of quality that we were hoping for. But it's been a process, and I'm still buying machinery now and flipping out things that don't work quite as well. So.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. We have a question from Field Good Farms. How does the coordination and planning happen between farmers?
For the most part, I kind of run things like a tyrant. So at this point, there's about 5 other farmers that I work with really closely who are doing their own on-farm processing, but I'm making most of the decisions myself. So I'll say this year, every bundle is going to get, 1 pound of clover seeds, or only half a pound this year because, clover seeds you're not going to use tons of. And this year we'll get 4 pounds of quinoa, and next year you'll get 5 pounds of quinoa. I'm doing all of that coordinating and then ordering from other farmers. So I'm really acting like a retailer, but a retailer that's maybe hopefully a little bit more collaborative. We've included 4 or 5 pounds of quinoa every year. This year, the farmer only had off-colored quinoa. His quinoa crop was a total disaster. He had some from the previous year, but he wasn't comfortable using it. So we left out the quinoa and included some more of other products. So we increased the amount of einkorn flour that we were purchasing from his farm and included some quinoa flour as well in smaller quantities. So just putting out a lot of feelers, asking the other farmers what they have available, and then trying to kind of juggle that into what would be usable for people, and kind of fitting in the prices to each other as well. So yeah, so I'm kind of doing that coordinating side on my own, but hoping to get lots of input from other people for sure. So
awesome. And maybe we'll just do this one more question, and we'll save the rest for the end. But there's one more question from Alex asking, are there more farmers growing naked oats now? They seem like a great crop.
There are a few for sure. I think Chris was even talking about growing some. When we started milling, we were pounding out our business plan in our living room, living in Montreal. And we went out for a road trip out to Nova Scotia and visited some farms there that were growing naked oats. And another place, I forget the name of the place in Ontario. So there was one place in Ontario, one in Nova Scotia growing naked oats and milling them as well. Nothing that I've come across in Western Canada, and another mill in Montana, and a few others scattered here and there. I think they do make a lot of sense. I've had inquiries from larger oat kind of manufacturers, some of the bigger names in organics, who are interested in hulless oats because they don't need to be heat processed and because that's much less carbon intensive. But there are disadvantages of naked oats as well. When you don't heat process them and they're shelf stable, you don't need to keep them in the fridge, but they do have declining flavor over time, and they will become rancid within 9 to 12 months. And so for the industrial food system, that's just not long enough. Grains in the industrial food system take a long time in distribution. It takes a long time to be packaged and then sent out to brokers, and then from brokers to other brands, and brands to retailers. So they're looking for a much longer shelf life on their products. And so naked oats don't really fit into a long distribution network because of those limitations.
Great, thank you for that context. Yeah, that's good to know. We do have a few more questions, but yeah, we'll try to get to them at the end of all the presentations because I'm already running over time. But thank you so much, Amy. This has been great. No, I'm the time manager, not doing a good job. But next, I'll introduce our next speaker, Samuel Peprah. Samuel has many years of practical experience in forages, grain crops, integrated pest management, organic farming, and ruminant nutrition. Samuel is the manager and research coordinator of Mackenzie Applied Research Association. He has collaborated with producers, researchers, and industry players to address agricultural challenges faced by producers via research, and they do a lot of great extension delivery up there. Samuel has 3 peer-reviewed publications and has presented at the International Rangeland Conference, the America Society of Animal Sciences, and many other workshops. Samuel holds a bachelor's degree in agriculture from the University of Ghana and a Master of Science in Forages and Ruminant Nutrition from the University of Saskatchewan. So without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Samuel.
Okay, thank you, Tiara. Once again, my name is Samuel Peprah. I'm the manager and research coordinator at Mackenzie Applied Research Association. And tonight I'll be speaking on heritage grains. So I will begin by thanking the organizers for inviting me to speak at this webinar. First and foremost, as she said, I work with the Mackenzie Applied Research Association here in Fort Vermilion, Alberta. And then we are close to the Northwest Territories, and this is the last frontier of large-scale farming in Canada. We have about 21 to 22 hours of long summer days, which has beneficial effects on the crops that we grow. So basically, our region is termed as Northern Advantage, which makes our crops grow bigger and then of higher quality compared to any part of the province and even Western Canada. We have a land base of about 300 acres, where we have about 50 acres being organic and then the rest being conventional sites. This is a graphical view of our location where basically we are. I just did a snapshot where we have 272 organic farmers, and this comprises about 41% of organic farmers in Alberta, which indicate that we are doing a very good job in our region. So our mission basically is to be a hub of providing relevant data and then resources to our farmers in the northeast of Alberta. Our vision is to promote future agriculture by reducing production costs to improve crops and livestock marketing and environmental sustainability. So now the question begins, what are heritage grains? So heritage grains are basically varieties of wheat, rye, barley, oats grown before or in the early 1980s. in the 1900s. And then examples are the emmer, the einkorn, the red fife, cornea, buckwheat, etc. With the current situation which globally everyone is facing, which is the drought across the length and breadth of Canada, where AFC Canada has made a projection that we will be experiencing more warmer and then hot and drier conditions in the coming years. This has created a lot of concerns between policymakers, scientists, producers, and everyone concerned about agriculture. So in Europe, there was a conference which was being held, and then their main question was, what should organic farmers grow? Should they be growing heritage, or should they be growing modern spring wheat? Before we answer this question, I want us to go through this presentation, and then we'll be able to have answers to why organic farmers need to go back and start growing heritage grains. So now the big question comes here again. So which of these heritage grains should organic farmer grow? Should it be einkorn, or emmer, or spelt? This can only be answered by the producer, who decides based on the objectives and then the market demand of each variety. So we come back to the agronomic reasons why organic farmers need to grow heritage grains. One is because it's adaptable to every region, because it's more tolerant to environmental stress, being cold, droughts, wet soil, etc., than modern varieties. And it has relatively large root system, which is able to draw moisture and nutrients deep below the soil up for the crops to use. There's an article in Europe, basically in Netherlands, which has termed heritage grains as climate resilient crop. So in this, our current situation where we are faced with dry and hotter weather, this article suggested growing heritage grains, you are more likely to tackle climate change. From our own sites, the work that we've done so far, we realized heritage grains are basically the emmer and then the red fife are resistant to fusarium head blight, and then rust, and then smart. And this has been more evident in Manitoba, where some works done at the University of Manitoba also confirms that yes, heritage wheats are more rust resistant than the modern wheats. We also realized from studies it requires lower input requirements, and it also reduces weed pressure, specifically the emmer. It also has a better resistance to lodging and also resistance to pre-harvest sprouting. So our question was, so based on this research and these findings, Canadian organic farmers seen any profits, any success in growing heritage grain? And I was surprised to see that the answer is yes. Modern farmer finds success with heritage grains, published by the Alberta Farmer Express. So which means the data which we found from the research is evident in a farmer's field. And these heritage grains are also able to resist sprouting. In 2020, my region specifically, we had double amount of precipitation, which caused most of the crops to sprout before harvesting. But we did not see this with the heritage grains. One of the main challenges facing the Americans are basically heart disease and high blood pressure. And then the Washington Post did a very good article publication. And then it came out that some of the heritage grains like amaranth, emmer, along with millets konya and then rye, these are able to prevent cancer, heart disease, and high blood pressure. And the article went on to define why consumers are willing to pay premium for these grains. And then you realize in certain parts of the states, Pennsylvania and then New York states, specifically the Willsboro, where we have more of the restaurants, more of the bakery joints, focusing on more of this organic heritage grain to be able to lower heart disease and high blood pressure of these American people. And basically, the main reason is these grains have higher beta glucan, and this is able to widen or try to break out any clog in the arteries and then the veins and then the bloodstream. So making it sure the consumer has a free flow of blood in their veins. So the question comes back to us. Now that we've seen the agronomic benefits of heritage grain, now that we know the health benefits of heritage grain, one may be wondering, how do I grow this heritage grain? So one, this is basically similar to the modern wheat that we grow in terms of the rotation, the planting dates, the field days, just similar to what we grow the modern wheat. And then it also has lower seeding rates for basically emmer and then einkorn, which we're looking at a typical of 100 pounds per acre. But North Dakota and then New York suggests we can go lower than this 100 pounds per acre, which is 75 pounds per acre seeding rates. The University of Cornell also suggested you can go lower than that, 47 pounds per acre. So with the seeding rates, one is to also bear in mind, we have the hulled wheat, and then we have the hulled wheat. And then with the hulled wheat, the seeding rate comes lower than the hulled wheat. And both works in the states indicate that you can lower the seeding rates at about 50 pounds per acre, and you still be getting the yield and then the quality expected. So now that we know the benefits, now that we know how to grow the heritage grain, the big question comes, what are some of the challenges of growing heritage grain? So we made a brief analysis, and then we compared some data way back in 1860, where we had ancient heritage land race, and then why modern wheat or modern varieties came about. So basically, you could see from the data in the 1860, these are the yield of the heritage grains. And then in 1960, where after the Second World War, the scientists came about, and then their main, it was basically a myth, which they said we need to produce more food to feed the world. So they provided 3 indicators, which is production of higher yields of grain. Second was creation of uniform or consistent size grain kernel produced on each plant. And then the third one was to create employment, where they need to put in more input on the crops for us to get the yield. So this also helped breeders and the other manufacturing companies, so putting in more fertilizer, putting in a lot of biostimulant and other things to increase the yield of modern wheat. So that's why when you compare the yield of heritage to modern, you realize they are extremely lower compared to that of modern varieties. And this another challenge is where heritage grain require dehulling, which requires a special equipment. This equipment is what we basically use, but these are for small plot trial. You can't use this on a large scale. And then I understand large scale dewatering equipment is expensive. I don't know how much it costs, but most scientists say it's expensive to acquire one. And so when you pour the seeds in like this, and then it's able to dehull and then take out all the husk, everything from it, and then the seeds becomes this for you to use. So this is a data from my site, and then I would like you to see some comparison here where we focused on disease resistance, and it clearly confirms the earlier publication and then several articles which have been published where we analyzed or we assessed Fusarium head blight, we assessed rust and then smut of these heritage grains. And then the numbers indicate there, one means it's basically susceptible to disease, and then the number 9 means they are more disease resistance. So we see that these numbers they are almost 9, indicating that our research or the crops that we did are more resistant to Fusarium head blight and then to smut and then rust. We compare again to the yield where we have Falcon, which is more of barley variety, and then HB 1863B, which is also barley variety. And looking at the yield, it was truly amazing to see heritage grain having yield similar or higher than the modern ones. We come to the protein side. The milling companies request for protein content of wheat to be as low as 13%. And looking at the protein content that we obtained here, it shows that all the heritage grain have higher milling qualities. And then we also come back to the test weights, which the milling companies prefer 52 pounds per bushel of test weight, and then we are getting more than that 52 pounds per bushel, which indicate that all this heritage grain qualifies to be used for milling qualities. So now we come back to some data in the US to reconfirm if that agrees with the work that we did in Canada, basically 45 million. And so we have some Willsboro, which is in New York, a town in New York, and then looking at the yield of winter spelt, it was extremely very, very high compared to modern varieties, which indicate that some varieties of heritage grain can really perform. So it requires that the farmer decides or makes a selection of the varieties which will be more adaptable to its region, and then making sure he or she maximizes yield in that. In North Dakota State University, with the spring spelt, look at the yield over there, which is similar or even higher than modern varieties. We come to Pennsylvania, and then we see very low yield, and their reason was they were assessing if heritage grain we were able to compete more with wheat. So they didn't control any weeds, they just allow everything to grow, and that also played a role in why we are seeing lower yield compared to the other locations in the state. With this, we are looking at emmer, where we have 12 different varieties, and all this were done in the state's 4-year data. And looking at the data from the North Dakota State University, those yields are very impressive compared to Pennsylvania again, where you see extremely lower yields. So a farmer needs to be more vigilant and select varieties which are more adaptable to his region to gain the yield expected. Lastly, is einkorn, where we had some varieties. All these are works done in the States, and we are seeing similar trend in North Dakota State University. So this data basically agrees with the work that we did in Fort Vermilion. Also, you see very low yield in Pennsylvania states. So we need to take into consideration the varieties that we select. So my take-home message, good production, this separated grain is a very good production potential as the future predicts of getting hotter drought and warm weather. And also a farmer needs to select varieties which is adaptable to the soil climatic condition of the region. That's also very, very important. And some rotated grains such as spelt yields similar to modern wheat. And there's also good market potential. Why? Because now consumers are more concerned about their health. Most of the qualities that were found from this separated grain are some products which you can buy from the pharmacy. You can go to the pharmacy and buy beta-glucan, but these are in the separated grain. So when you are consuming this, you're not only consuming food, you're also consuming medicine, which is good for a consumer. So consumers are ready to pay premium on such produce. And one thing is it also requires de-walling, which is a challenge for producers. So that's our contact information, and thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm all ears to answer. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Samuel. It's great to see like the results that you're getting in Mackenzie County and how that compares to other research stations. If anyone has questions, again, feel free to add those to the chat or raise your hand. I do have a quick question to start off. I'm just curious, why are there lower seeding rates for emmer and einkorn?
The lower seeding rates was because although rotated grain are resistant to lodging, we've seen some lodging instances with emmer and then einkorn. So we advise, and it also has an extensive tillers. So when you're able to lower the seeding rates, it's able to reduce lodging in that two varieties. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I was also curious when you were talking about the disease resistance in heritage grains, think of that like 8 to 9 level, but how does that compare to our modern crops or like things like Vesper, AAC's tradition? Where would they fall on that 1 to 9 scale?
Okay, so basically from the current data that we are experiencing more fusarium head blight in Alberta, basically. And so one of the main priorities of the Wheat Commission and the Barley Commission is fusarium head blight. That's what we are. So farmers or even researchers have been advised to treat their seeds before seeding. And then one other thing is smut and rust, which is basically common in central and southern Alberta. We are fortunate we don't have much incidence in our region, but we are still advised to be taking cautious and then try to do everything possible to lower the incidence or infestation of this smut and rust disease in our region.
Right. Thank you. We have a question from Field Good Farms. Thank you. They say thank you for your presentation. Do you have recommendations of where to source seed for heritage grains?
Okay, we got our seeds. I don't want to do any commercial for any company, but I understand they give us a subsidy, which is Fieldstone Organic. They give us subsidy to use their seed for research. So I can mention them, but I'm not doing any commercial for them. Yeah.
That's fair, not sponsored. We have a question from Chris. Are the seeds saved from multi-year trials and reused, or is new seed used each season?
Okay, so we use, because of the plant breeders' rights, which requires that after using the seed for research, you must not reseed the following year. So we give this, because of the health benefits, we give this to the animals to consume, and then we get new seeds for the following year.
I didn't know that. Thank you. And maybe we'll just do our last question from Kate. What acreages are in these heritage grains in Alberta?
I can't pinpoint in Alberta, but I know in Ontario there are quite a number of acreage. I spoke to AFSC before doing the presentation, and they have no data on that, so I can't comment on that for now. Yeah.
That's interesting. What about, would you know roughly in Mackenzie County, how much acreage there would be?
I have no idea. Mostly we get our data from AFC because crop insurance, and if they tell you no one has insured their crop on such crops, then it means there's no data on that for now.
Yeah, that's fair. That's something yeah, maybe we should look into and see if we can get them to take that data. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sorry to rush you, but thank you so much, Samuel. This has been great getting this like research context. And if there are other questions, again, we'll try to, if we have remaining time, we'll try to get those to you. But next, I will introduce our last but certainly not least speaker, Chris Wooding. Chris runs Ironwood Organics, which is a small farm located in Eastern Ontario. They grow heritage grains, including wheat, rye, oats, and barley. And most of what they grow is used by local bakers, brewers. They also grind flour on farm in their own mill. And their mission is to be a leader in growing nutrient-dense heritage grains while supporting a strong baking and brewing community. And he's also a fantastic speaker. I know he does a lot of speaking events in Ontario and around, so we're really excited to have you here today. And maybe, Samuel, if you could stop sharing your screen and then we can pass it over to Chris.
Great, thanks, Tiara. Yeah, it was a great presentation, Samuel. It's fascinating to see how everybody's adapting with the same theme, but looking at it through different lenses. And the money lens, obviously you have to sell what you grow, because farming is not volunteer work. That's one of my mantras. And certainly a lot of that yield data is really consistent with ours, and that notion from sort of 1800 to the turn of the century of getting 1,000 pounds an acre, and that's just about exactly what we get, and that notion of a sustainability yield with no inputs. And I think the caveat is that you can get that yield annualized year over year, so that cumulatively on a 10-year business cycle you're becoming competitive again. I thought I would focus more on tools. I started growing heritage grains probably 15, 16 years ago, and I started by hand. I literally seeded by hand and harvested with a pair of scissors and threshed with a pair of gloves. And you can do it. And we've come an awful long way through there. We have 29 implements and 6 combines and 3 gravity boxes and 4 seed cleaners. And so it's not out of control, but part of that is you have the tool and it's sitting idle for the vast majority of the year. So you start thinking, well, what else can we do with that? Can we grow with that? So we're starting to do beans and heritage soybeans and IP beans and stuff like that. So this is a run through of the tools that we've used over the years. Scaling from plots to self-sufficiency to the 1/4 acre to the 4 or 5 acre. A large field for us is 5 acres. That's a climate weather window. It takes us 4 hours to disc it, an hour and a half to seed it, an hour to pack it, 5 hours to harvest it. And with climate change, we rarely get 2 or 3 good weather days in a row. So by constraining that area that we grow on a per grain variety and the scale of the equipment we have, it really works out well for us. So this is the farm looking south. It's actually 2 farms, an east and a west. We number our fields left to right from 1 to 7, and the other side from 1 to 9. So there's about 15 fields that range from 1 to 14 acres. And most of them, you can see on the left here, we're starting to split into smaller pieces, more because we're growing more and more varieties, and we're just running out of rotational land. So 5 basic steps to get grain is the seeds and then planting them, harvesting them, cleaning them, and drying them. And every single one of those process steps has its foibles and its efficiencies. And you know, if you're thinking of doing it, the biggest constraint is that you get 21 times the problem. So it's really easy to put it in the ground, and harvesting becomes a little more difficult, and cleaning and drying can become nightmares. So it's a growing problem thing, and make sure you can do it in a manual sort of protocol, because you know, efficiency and automation simply scales things up. We get the vast majority of our seeds from gene banks. It's a human right. Canada signed the UN Convention on Germplasm. So you can go to the PGRC in the prairies and ask for 10 grams of any grain that was ever grown anywhere in the world. You sign a material transfer agreement, which acknowledges your receipt of that grain. Due to UPOV and plant breeders' rights and the variety registration list, you cannot sell that grain as seed, but you can certainly sell it as food. You can sell it as flour. There's a lot of small seed houses. Prairie Garden Seed comes to mind, Jim Tournier and Rochelle. There's also research programs that you can get seed stock from, and the vast majority of what we have is seed that we have grown, bulked, and saved. It's from 10 grams. It's about 6 years to get to your first ton. So on the 5th year, you get a bushel, you get 50 pounds, 60 pounds. And one of the things we're really trialing is population wheats. A lot of that rotation is to try and keep the germplasm discrete and unique, and prevent cross-contamination. And we had a terrible mishap about 3 years ago where we mixed 2 seed lots, and then we decided, well, let's do it. So we mixed 4 seed lots, and we called it iron fife, and we're actually starting to do more and more of that population wheat, where we're inputting different varieties, disease-resistant ones, white wheats, lower anthocyanin wheats, and just trying to get a polyculture of wheats that have a much broader disease resistance profile to them. First thing is amendments in packing. Everyone should get a packer. I think it's a critical piece to field leveling, compacting the soil. It really stabilizes germination. In organic regimes, I do not want high input, so we do a little bit of wollastonite spreading. We do a little bit of nutrient and trace element top up. The farm is very, very tired from soil perspective. And I realized that all the mycelium in the world are not going to break down enough rocks to increase the boron and selenium and manganese. And because we don't harvest the straw, that nutrient density that we add to the field, that trace element fertility, goes into a vertical cycle. So it's going from soil to crop. We harvest the head, the 4 inches at the top, and the other 38 inches of straw gets worked back in the ground, increases the organic matter. So it's a really nice rotational cycle that doesn't leach off. So the seeding rate's 100 pounds an acre, plus or minus. A lot of this has to do with tillering, which is the old ability of the heritage grains to send out secondary, tertiary, quaternary stalks. I've had as many as 11 from one seed. So as the nutrient profile is richer in the soil and the moisture is there, the yield is tremendously fluctuating based on the number of tillers. Earthways work just fine, which is the old vegetable garden seeders that most of you will be familiar with. We used to try and use the beet plate and drill it out slightly larger, and now we just use a pea plate, and it makes for a slightly higher density. But all of our trials, we seed at 7-inch row spacing. And in a busy spring, I'll walk probably 16, 17 kilometers with an earthquake. So it's a little bit insane. Planet Juniors we've used before, especially with our beans and soybean trials. There are those fancy Jang seeders, and you can gang them together in a plot of 6, which would be really, really good for sort of plot trials. Old seed drills work really, really well. I'll show you a couple of pictures in a second. They're anywhere from sort of, I don't know, they used to be 100, 150 bucks, 300 bucks, and I think they're up around 1,000 now. Parts are starting to slowly disappear, but the steel is really good on them, and they tend to last for a long time. And the advantage, I'll show you a few pictures as well, that you can change the run settings on the old seed drills and actually use them as a research seeder. So we have a broadcast seeder. These are sort of a science equivalent of the 3-point hitch one. We actually use this out front of the tractor, and we broadcast understory, dwarf clover, crimson clover. You can do frost seeding with it. And in some of the population wheats, we can actually use this as a broadcast seeder for cereals as well. And it's highly adjustable in terms of the frequency, the width, and the tongue on it. So you can get anything up to a 30-foot spread. We try and match our spread on the front of the tractor 10 feet with a finger tine weeder behind us. So in this winter wheats, which are up now sort of 3.5 inches, in maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, once the soil warms up and we get the beginning of white roots of the wheat germination, we'll actually bolt this to the front of the tractor, broadcast our dwarf clover at the front end, and then run a finger tine, an Einbach weeder behind it. Planet Juniors, this is our bean, heritage bean seeder. We offset it. So there's 3 gang with the 2 tires. There's a lot of machinating in terms of how long the rows are and how wide they are, and the need to sort of match between your combining, harvesting, and yeah, just try and think the whole process through from cradle to grave. This is an old International 10 seed drill, and this for years is what we used for our plot seeding. So we just took plywood, drilled holes in the bottom, took 4-liter water jugs, cut the tops off, threaded them down inside, and then from the back we can run and put like 2 cups in each of the first 5 runs, skip 2 runs, and then do 5 more. We can do 4 on this side, skip 1, do 3 in the middle, skip 1. So it's a really, really nice way of making sure that each run is roughly the same length and duration. We bought battery-powered vacuums that we take into the field with us. So after we finish that run, we simply open everything up, vacuum all the cleans out in field, and load it again for the next sets of trials. This is an earlier version of that. You can see there's a clover box out front and a fertilizer box in the back, which you can use for granular stuff or elastonite and seaweed and whatever else. This is actuated with 2 pull ropes on the left side, so you can actually do half gangs or whole gangs, or if you're doing a lot on one side and trials on the other. So there's a lot of variability in the mix and matching. And it'll do about a 4-acre overflowing, and heat to the top, it'll do 4 acres. So that seeding weight of 1,000 pounds an hour, a bushel, which is our 5th year bulking up volume, will do about a half an acre. And if you have 1 pound, it'll do 300 square feet, and an ounce will give you 25 square feet. And your gene bank requests will give you 10 grams, which is a plot sort of a 1.5 by 1.5 feet. But it grows very quickly. A lot of heads have 18 to 19 to 21, 23 kernels on them. So you're looking at a 21-fold multiplication rate. This is a crazy contraption we just picked up 3 weeks ago. It's actually a plot seeder, so it runs completely off hydraulics. There's an old Wisconsin engine at the front. And this is a Hiji seeder, which dispenses them. So it does what that water bottle contraption does, but in a much, much better professional manner. And it means I don't have to walk along with the earthway seeder, walking 15 kilometers a year. So we're just tracking down spare parts for this. There's a gear mechanism broken, and some of the drive bushings are missing as well. But mechanically, it's running now. It's all tuned up, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll get that going for this season. Harvesting the grain. reaping, binder reapers, threshing, and winnowing are the four major steps. The reaping is simply cutting it down. Threshing it is separating the heads, the kernels from the heads. And winnowing is using wind to blow the chaff away. That's the old expression, separating the wheat from the chaff. Combines are one of those peculiar words that are nouns and verbs, and it's actually combining those three steps of cutting it, threshing it, and winnowing it. In the heritage grains, this is a little bit of an issue because of that notion of tillering I was mentioning. So that as the plant tillers, when you come time for maturity, you're going to have 2 or 3 heads that are really ripe and dry, and maybe 4 heads that are still, 20, 23% moisture. And then you might have 2 heads beneath that, late tillers, that are still in their milk phase. And that is the quintessential reason for the old romantic notions of using a binder reaper, cutting the grains and stooking them in the fields where they would continue to mature and ripen. And once they were ripe and dry, then they would go into a threshing floor, or you've seen the old crazy pictures of those huge horse-drawn threshers and coal-driven threshers with the massive amounts, and you would actually bring the grain from the field to the threshing location. Because the combine wants even levels of maturity and ripeness, this is one of the advantages of the modern wheats. Disadvantages, in my view, is that they bred out a lot of that tillering, so that everything is ripe at the same state. Combines, modern ones, are self-repair. They have their own motors. A lot of the early types were pull types, so they run off a PTO shaft, which is nice because there's no extra motor to manage. And a lot of the old pull types have scour cleaners, which are sieves cleaners, as the last thing after it's gone through all the sieves and the fans in the combine. As it comes across to go down into the grain bin, it actually runs through, and you can peel off all that lamb's quarter that Emmy was talking about, and clover seed and timothy seed. And we actually use that scour cleaner to harvest timothy seed. So as we clean the combines out between grain varieties, we will do our vacuuming, and then we'll do 1 lap of a hay field, a timothy field, and we'll literally get a bushel of organic timothy seed per lap of the field, and we use that as our last sort of flushing mechanism to clean the combines out. So this is all hand walked. A lot of these smaller plots might be 2-3 ounces. The longer ones might be 1.5 pounds. This is getting on ripening season, so the longer ones were done with the large seed drills. The smaller ones down in the bottom third here would have been done using the water bottles, and you can see there's different lengths and widths. And then the ones in the bottom left here were all from the Russian gene bank, and they were all done by hand with the earthquake. So harvesting them, the simplest thing is a sickle, a pair of scissors. About 8 years ago, we started using these antique sheep shears, and they're absolutely remarkable. You can get such a fine tooth on them, and because they're sprung loaded, you don't have to open your hand up after you finish cutting, and they spring back just fine. These are what our trials look like. One of the benefits of this with weather and stuff like that is you can harvest during a stable weather period and hang these grains upside down on ropes and let them cure further before getting into the threshing and winnowing. This is an old binder reaper. Straw is important to us. We have some waxy wheat trials, and we'd love to try and thatch a roof at some day. So this does 2 things that the combine does. So it cuts the grain and brings it to the back and ties it in a stook. It works, but we're having trouble getting the knotter going. But as we start bulking up on some of the waxy long straw grains, this is going to become an important piece to it. What you have at harvest, threshing it. The simplest way to do it that we found is a pair of rubber gloves, a piece of plywood with a piece of hardware cloth, 1/4-inch hardware cloth, and simply rub the grains up and down on it. And this will do the threshing, which again is separating the husks from the grains. Virtually all the old heritage grains are naked wheats. The heritage wheats are your einkorn, which is a diploid, and your emmers and durhams, which are tetraploids, and spelt, which is the first hexaploid of the grains. All those have hulls and need to a large extent, need secondary dehulling. once you graduate past doing it by hand, a chain flail works really, really well. This one is set up for a 45-gallon drum, a plastic food grade drum. You can set up much smaller ones for a 5-gallon pail. Just put the lid on it, put a hole through the top, and you can put all your heads from your trials in there. Electric drill, run it up and down, and that chain flail will actually do what that manual flailing motion in times gone by. This is an old stationary thresher. Again, we were really concerned with trying to find mechanisms to save that straw. So if we have our binder reaper, this is a device that there'll be a table here across the top. You can see it's a notch tooth thresher, and it wouldn't put all the grain through. It would simply put the heads into there, and it's the back end of a combine. So it would do the threshing, it would do the winnowing, and there'd be sieves in the back, and down at the bottom left there, you can see the 2 trays where the 2 different grades of grain would come out. This is a modern version of that. Again, the stationary thresher runs off a little Wisconsin motor. You put the heads up on top and push them through the throat there. This is the concave. The concave will go down. At the bottom is a fan, a variable speed fan, and it will blow all the chaff out the end, and your clean grain will come out the bottom. So it's virtually everything that a combine is without the cutting head. And this little gadget, you can tow it out to the field, and when the concave is running, there's actually an air compressor that runs and charges, so that once you finish your grain variety, you can clean it out and move on to the next variety. This is a plot combine. This is a Hiji, a 1980s vintage, runs off an old Volkswagen motor. It's got a 4-foot head, so I wouldn't combine anything more than an acre. But for me, it does in 5 minutes what used to take me maybe 7 hours when I was doing manual harvesting and manual threshing and manual winnowing. This simply drive along, and let me see if I can rewind it. You can see the bag there at the center. So it's cutting it, harvesting it, threshing it, winnowing it, cleaning it, and it dumps it right in that bag. And after the variety is done, we open it up, we use the leaf blower, open all the vents, blow the whole machine out, put a new bag on it, and do the next thing. So literally in the day, I can do what used to take me probably a month maybe, and would drag on, through till January and February. This is our standard combine. It's an old Massey 35. We actually have 3 of them. A parts one, a regular one, and we have a variable speed one that has a dynamic clutch that we keep slow for harvesting beans and soybeans. Across the top there at the back is that scour cleaner that I was telling you about. So as the grains come through the combine, the last transfer across there, as it's rotating in this disc, all the small seeds get sieved out and get trapped in a bag at the back of the combine. In organic agriculture, that's nice because you're actually reducing the weed load of your field. So each annualized year, a lamb's quarter plant has 500,000 seeds per plant, and they're viable for 18 years, 20 years or something. So, a modern combine spews all that crap out in the field and just makes your weed load even worse. Slow going, 3/4 of an acre an hour. I do that semi-intentionally. I'm sure I could go faster, but you've spent your entire year to grow grain, and you're down to 1 day that you're going to, crystallize that effort, and why rush? A lot of contract combiners, you can see when you drive by their fields, in 2 months after harvest, you see huge amounts of grain that's been blown out the back end, and it really makes sense to spend the time and calibrate the fan and just make it so that it's as good as you can, and go slow enough to make sure you crystallize that effort. As your yields increase, the onboard bushel of the old combines in the top there is about 20 bushels. So every lap of a 4-acre field, 2 laps, we would have to enter it. We have a couple of 200 bushel gravity boxes that we could then bring it from the fields to the barn and the seed cleaning plant. And then last year we upgraded 2 years ago to an old gleaner, a Model K. It's 1978 vintage. It's a major gas guzzler, but it is 3 acres an hour, so it's 400% more efficient. It was only, I think, $1,800. It was $1,000 to float, and within a week of using it, I blew the clutches. The clutches were $900, And then that moved the problem to the other side, and we blew the belt on the separator clutch, which ripped out the hydraulics and broke the separator clutch plate, which I found at a wrecking yard in Owen Sound. And we finally got it all back together for a total cost of about $5,000. But everything in terms of the clutches and the drive gears are all brand new now. So fingers crossed it'll last me for another decade, 15 years. But a lot of those parts are now becoming discontinued. So, you know, it's aged obsolescence here. So cleaning. One thing we learned over the years is get the weed seed out of there ASAP. The grain, it's an inversely proportionate transect, that the longer you leave it in the field, the drier it gets, which means the easier it is to clean. But it also means that every time it rains, the mildews and heads and the quality and the protein and all that begins to degrade. So again, back to that notion that you spent all year growing grain, we are more inclined to harvest early at 18, 19, 20% moisture. And when that happens, once the grain ripens up, the understory weeds start racing up to the top. So you're closing that gap between the clean heads and the wet weeds underneath. But we generally will start combining at 11 and finish at sort of 5 o'clock at night, just as the dew setting, and we'll have dinner, and then we'll start seed cleaning immediately, everything we harvested that day until 2, 3 in the morning, mostly to get this weed seed separated out, because the moisture that's in the weed seed at 50% moisture is just going to move towards your grain. And at the end of it, you're going to have a much wetter grain that you're then going to have to dry back down again. So a basic seed cleaning is scalping, which is removing everything that's bigger than the grain you want to keep. There's a process called sieving, which is keeping everything you want on top, and everything smaller falls through, such as the clover, the vet seed, the lamb's quarter, pigweed, all that sort of stuff. And then what you have left after those two processes is seed that is the similar size. And then you run an air current through it, either pushing it or pulling it, a vacuum kind of air current. And that based on your density differentials. And as you keep cramping up the wind speed, you're going to start blowing out other bits of chaff and bits of seeds and a bit of fusarium head blights, you know, tombstoning where the head didn't quite fill properly. And, you know, it becomes, again, a slippery slope that the higher you turn the wind up, the more blow by that you're getting, but the cleaner your wheat is. There are disc separators, these Carter discs, which Amy had mentioned, which we ironically purchased for them. They're gravity tables, which we don't have. And for the einkorns, emmers, a few of the Durhams and spelts, you need dehullers. We built a prototype dehuller just with a hand grinder and a rubber plate, and it worked unbelievably well. We grew an emmer called Utrecht Blue, and it was just absolutely amazing, like a 95% success rate. So we're going to try and scale that up with an old steel burr mill maybe this summer. Let's see if we can get it going. So this is our cleaning plant on the left here. Dirty grain in totes. We store everything in totes because we grow so many different varieties. So they're either half ton, 36, 36, 42, or they're a full ton tote, which is 48, 48, 50 kind of thing. And we auger the grain up, and this is the top feed. It goes down through two shoes, the scalping shoe and then the sieving screw, and then the fan, which is this burlap sack here, which catches all the dust and whatnot. And then it comes out of the bottom and it gets augered back up into the tote. So it's not self-sustaining. It takes a lot of babysitting. And in the winter, we have the doors open, and we'll actually take it straight from the field with a auger, leaving a tractor, a hydraulic auger. And in that state, a lot of it runs in steady state. If you tune your auger to the speed at which the cleaning plant can clean it and the auger can unload it, pretty much everything runs itself for sort of a 5 or 6 hour window. And there's two other down in the bottom left here. You can't quite see them, but they're old Vacuaway cleaners. So they have 4 shoes, 2 scalping screens up top, and then 2 sieving screens. So you can actually grade your wheat. All the screens are in 64ths of an inch. They're rounds or slotted or diamonds in the case of buckwheat. And grain tends to be a beautiful plump kernel, a 6/64ths of an inch, and your tiny shorts that become chicken feed are sort of 5/64ths of an inch. Drying, it's simply air movement. I'm a huge advocate not for. I don't think it's right using fossil fuels and burning propane to dry grain. A lot of the propane emissions are carcinogenic, and to burn propane and inject it into your grain stack to dry it just seems crazy to me. So we let the grain heat itself up. The biological activity will literally heat grain. It will begin almost composting, I guess. This is a dust blower with an 8-inch static head, about 1600 CFM. And when we clean the totes, we put a perforated big O down the middle of it and take the top up. And then as the grain warms, it brings moisture away from the grain into the air, and then we inject air down the bottom and it takes the air out. And we just let the grain heat up and blow the air out, heat up, blow the air out. And it takes maybe 6 to 10 days to get that moisture content down from 20%, 18% down to 13, 14. We tend to leave our grains a little bit damp because we save all of our seed and reuse it. So we want to keep it viable. Other tools, moisture testers, storage when you get to scale, and again, we've never got to the point that we need silos, either galvanized silos, or there's a lot of poly silos for sort of 2-ton, 15-ton. We've always sort of stayed at that back level. Yeah, single bag sowers. I mean, they're $900. A moisture tester. It's important for us to validate before it goes into final storage that we do in fact have it dry enough. We send all of the grain for lab testing for vomitoxin, down levels from Fusarium infection, and we get a protein content back, and we double verify that moisture content. Compost tea is another critical piece for us. We literally do 0 amendments. However, that soil fertility is critical from a mycelium perspective. So we in the big bucket on the left here, this 500-gallon carboy, we add water, we add socks, we add mycelium and aerate it, highly oxygenate it for sort of 12 to 18 hours, and then we dump it in this old chemical sprayer, which we sterilized out 100 times, and we spray it on the fields, especially in the spring. We can inoculate rhizobia if there's a clover understory in it. We've also done crazy things, taking a kilogram of wheat and putting it in a nylon, stocking it, and going and burying it under a 100-year-old tree, and going back in 2 weeks and getting it. And the whole thing is just engorged with mycelium. And then we'll put that mycelium sock into the compost tea and bubble it out and grow more, endomycelium for soil spreading. A lot of the research shows that the aerosolized spray, the finer the spray, the higher the morbidity of the microbes. So we tend to run it really, really low, not quite a drip, but a mist. And we try and do it in the mornings as well when there's a lot of dew on the leaves. I think that one of the things that kills the microbes are they just dehydrate. So anyway, but they're really successful, and we try and save our rhizobia. We'll when, especially in soybeans and edible beans, if we have a really good crop, we'll pull the plants up and dehydrate the root masses, and that becomes our rhizobia inoculant for the following year. Value adding is absolutely critical, I think, from a small on-farm operation. My rule of thumb is every time you touch it, it doubles in value. So you can sell it as a train load, or sell it as a truck load, or sell it as a ton, or sell it as a 20-kilo bag, or sell it as a 1-kilo bag. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're making more money, but you're adding value and you're paying yourself to farm. You could look at it that way. So this is a little Samet mill, top left. That's what we started on. Did all of our buckwheat and our early grains on that. Bottom left is a vertical mill, an old Meadows mill. The one in the center is the one we currently use now. It's an Osti from Austria. And we have 2 of them. This is the grain mill for flour, and then we have a smaller 12-inch version that we use for corn grits, buckwheat, and oat flour. And then this is one of the new mills that Andrew's making down in Vermont, the new Acreages stone mills. And I think there's probably 4 of them in Ontario and shipping worldwide. So he's really, really part of that new renaissance. So this is a lovely book. Just to close on it, The Hidden Life of Trees, and I'll just read it out. The reason trees share food and communicate is that they need each other. It takes a forest to create a microclimate suitable for tree growth and sustenance. Perhaps the saddest of all the plants are those that we enslave in our agricultural systems. Perhaps farmers can learn more from the forests and breed a little more wildness back into their grain and potatoes, so they will be more talkative in the future. And I just love that notion of you know, that talkativeness of grain, the soil, the mycelium, the interplant communications, and you know, in terms of a sustainability model, we're literally harvesting that grain head, which is 4 inches, and the heritage grains tend to come up, you know, to your chin or to your eye. So there's a massive amount of biomass that we're growing, and you know, from a philosophical perspective, because there's so much biomass, I think the grain harvest is literally a surplus harvest, as opposed to an extractive harvest where the field is actually in worse shape at the end of the season. And this is sort of the antithesis of these high input, high yielding grains. Climate pioneers, it's a thing that I've talked about for years, and I think the only thing that is different from our pioneering spirit and the original, you know, land extraction pioneers is that our ecosystem is not intact anymore. Our soils are not intact. Our wetlands are not intact. So we're farming now in a highly degraded environment, soil organic matter, wetlands, and an unstable climate. And I think heritage grains, because of that plasticity, is really, really going to come to the forefront in the next sort of 30 years as we approach, you know, famines and droughts and wars. And yeah, I think it's a really, really exciting time for heritage grains. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was fantastic. You could do a whole weekend of equipment demos. You've seen tools there.
Yeah, and it was all run down and it was all broken and I only did welding, so it's, yeah, it's a lot of yeah.
No, it's fantastic. I just wanted to flag that we are at around 8:40 your time. So I'm just wondering if you're able to stay on maybe for
sure. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
And if anyone on the call needs to head out, because we are a little bit over time, we are recording this and we'll put this on YouTube. So it's totally okay if you come back, but it's great if you can stay on. We had our first question from Becca, and I think, oh yeah, her question was, to whom do you sell your grain and flour? With your heterogeneous populations, do you sell that wheat directly to consumers or bakers? Can you sell it to an elevator?
We don't grow enough to sell to an elevator. I mean, a big harvest for us is a 4 or 5 acre field, which at 1,000 pounds an acre is 2 tons. So, and in years past, in the last decade, pre-COVID, we sold every single ounce from the farm, and we usually ran out within 14 to 16 months of harvest. So we always had this rotating buffer. And then with that baking pandemic, the craze and sourdough, we sold out by February, which is just unheard of. So we've actually started buying other organic grain to mill, and I realized that maybe we need to think of local food as Canada wide, because you know, I look at the 20,000 hectare farm, and those farmers don't have anybody in a 2-hour drive, and I'm sitting here with 7 million people within a 2-hour drive, and I can feed, you know, 300 of them, maybe 200 of them. So yeah, I really like that idea of bringing grain in from the prairies and doing the final value add here, and possibly doing the reverse as well, of starting to get all these grains that I bulked up and I've got to the ton, can't make them cost effective because that first ton is worth 20 grand, you know, 7 years of sweat equity. But to take that and send it to the prairies or send it to a larger grain growing area. Anyway, that's another different discussion. But yeah, so we try and split sort of a 60-40, 40-60 in terms of money. We want bakers to earn a living. Most bakers are in industrial urban areas, so they're all paying huge taxes and rent and insurance and whatnot. And if we charge them our cost of production, they just simply wouldn't be able to buy our grain, and they wouldn't get to feed people. So we sort of have a slippery sliding slope. So the smaller the package, tends to be the profit center, and that profit center sort of back funds our break-even proposition to bakers, so that net the gross revenue at the end of the year balances out. But I would, as we increase in milling capacity, I would say that is beginning to slide to the other end. And as millers are now getting to be confident to make a $10 loaf of bread or a $12 loaf of bread and put a QR code on it and say, this is the field that your loaf grew in, and there's one variety of wheat, and we can guarantee that this loaf of bread every Friday is going to taste exactly the same because it's going to be the same lot number, the same vintage. That backstory has enough of a value to it that $2 a loaf premium price now can start backfeeding the research and the bulking up. So.
Great, thank you. From David and Jocelyn, they say, wonderful presentation. What do you think of using Schmotzer farm machinery, another precise seeding and raking option? I might be saying that wrong, but it's in the chat.
I don't know what Schmotzer is. I think any farm machinery, I mean, my shtick is scale appropriate, you know, and old. You can buy a new plot combine for $85,000. And, you know, I would grow grain for 4 generations and never pay for that. So the smaller it is, the better it is. Or the more appropriately sized, the better it is. The more adaptable it is, the better it is, because you can do more things. Those little, those 3 Planet Juniors we got, they're not super precise, but we can do everything from you know, grain right the way up to fava beans on them. But I will Google that. But I think precision seeding has its place. I tend to just let nature take its course. And as I say, when I do the earthway seeding, I use a P plate, which is probably, I mean, it could be upwards to 200 pounds an acre seeding rate, you know. But my goal in those is bulking grain up, so the plant density is probably more than 1 grain seed per linear inch. So I think there's an absolute role for precision seeding where you can actually dial that in, and certainly from a tillering perspective, the amount of tillering is a function to the available resources. So by precision seeding, you will spread the seeds out equivalently and may double or even triple the yield if you're plot growing or small scale growing. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions folks have? If you want to either write something in the chat or put your hand up with the reactions button. So Andy Forbes from London, UK, has a question about bulking up heritage grains. Can you tell us a little bit more about your mycelium inoculation? How effective is it?
Sure. I mean, I don't know how effective it is because I don't know the difference of not doing it, but it's something that we've always done. So we really focus on hedgerows. When we're plowing, which we do every 30 months, maybe, we stop plowing when we hit tree roots, which generally leaves a 30 to 40 foot buffer between the hedgerows. And really, that's our primary mycelium inoculant. So that soil remains untilled in perpetuity. So as fields go into dormant or into fallow, those mycelium nettles will actually re-inoculate the field. But for the actual compost tea spreading, we will either use our saved rhizobial microbes for clover understories, or we, as I mentioned, we will take the wheat and inoculate it with rhizobia or mycelium from the forest. And to what extent that it doesn't appear to have any negative harm, like we don't see any massive crops, but you know, I think we're seeing less chlorotic growth, so we're seeing better nutrient transfer, especially in the trace elements. We just started about a third of the farm. We did that trace element top up. We did wollastonite, boron, manganese, sulfur. Sulfur was really, really, really low. And one of my concerns is that increasing that fertility in mycelium and trace elements would actually increase the disease load as well, because we've been just, fingers crossed, like 0 fusarium, 0 ergot for 9 years now, like undetectable, which is just remarkable. And I don't know how much of that is soil, how much of it's organic matter, how much of it are the grain varieties, how much of it is the understory, keeping raindrops and spores from getting up to the grain heads. I really don't know, but but I think it's effective. I mean, our mantra is diversity, stability, resiliency, and sustainability in that order. So the more organisms on the farm, the better, and that's subsoil organisms, the greater the diversity, and all that leads to stability, so that you can have a catastrophic event or a drought, and it you know, the field shrugs it off, as it were, and once you get that stability, now you're into resiliency, that you get these 1,000-year events, and the field can get through that at the same time. So I you know, from a philosophical perspective, it's all about diversity. You know, crop diversity, soil diversity, biodiversity, above grade, below grade, and the more life that's on the farm, the better and more stable it is.
Andy had a follow-up to that in the chat. Some research says modern wheats have lost been bred out ability to make mycorrhiza associations. Do you think that's true?
100%. I think so. The hexaploid wheats are 7 genes, 6 copies, so 42 chromosomes. I've read that the genome mapping they've finished recently is coming in at like 260,000, and I've read some people there's as many as 600,000 genes, and we've seen just remarkable epigenetic ability to compensate with drought and turning off the genes again that do on-head sprouting and all that sort of stuff, and tillering genes. And as soon as we started breeding and back breeding dwarf and semi-dwarf wheats, I think a lot of that wilderness and wildness of the wheats have disappeared. So I would absolutely, in fact, there are some heritage modern wheats that apparently will not grow without high input anhydrous ammonia injection and heavy fertilizer. You know, and you know, this notion of saving your seed, that you can argue that you're breeding for last year if you save only the good seed, but if a crop does well and you reintroduce and save all that seed, you're actually breeding back in, either truly genetically or epigenetically, that ability to get the ecto and endomycelium constructs. Yeah, and the ability, we had a field of so we started with spring wheat, red fife, and 10 years ago we took all the shorts and the seed cleaning and planted them in September, just expecting them to all die, and they all survived. So we grew them out over the course of a decade in more and more harsh environments, and now we have a really, really robust winter stable winter rose red fife, we call it. And 3 years ago, 2018, we had catastrophic floods, and we in a 2-acre field, acre and a half field, we're expecting 1,000 pounds, and we got 56. And we were going to till it under and decided to harvest it, and we're now growing that out in our wettest fields. And last year it had 8 inches of standing water until June, and it was a spectacular harvest. So we've actually, you know, when you look at rice being a grass as well, so potentially there's all these epigenetic, you know, genes in that hexaploid matrix, and all we need to do is create really, really severe environmental stresses through you know, wind and hurricane and floods and droughts and you know, late season frost and stuff. And if the plant survives that event and you save the seed, that event now is part of that epigenetic memory, and you have a new variety or a bioadaptable variety. So yeah, I fully believe that that's true.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And maybe I'll just do one more question from Rebecca. Is there a place that you can point folks to who are looking for seed for these niche grains? I constantly get asked about where to get seed for emmer, einkorn, spelt, and red fife by farmers in Ontario, in amounts to plant a few acres, not packet sizes.
The short answer is it's illegal to sell it as seed because it's not on the variety registration list. So if you can find someone to sell it as cattle, Fieldstone Organics, who we bring for milling purposes, there's nothing stopping you from planting that. But I mean, the other option or the other argument is that if you start with packaged seeds, and I see Jim Turnier here in front of me, Prairie Garden Seed, and you know, he started that Utrecht Blue, and it is around the planet. So you can certainly get a small packet seed or buy 3 of them, and that'll save you your first year. And by growing them on farm and saving your seed, you will literally have in 7 years, you will have your own farmer bred variety that is completely bioadapted to your soil mycelium and your degree days and all that sort of stuff. So there's really, really good warrant. I know that it's a lot of crazy sweat equity to get there. But by bulking up your own seed stores, then it's yours, and it's, as I say, bioadapted to your farm. Our very first crop of red fife was from northern Alberta, and it was so full of smut. It was insane. And we went out with, plastic bags, duct taped to our hips, every morning before dawn when the dew was on, and we cut heads and just up and down the field for like 3 years. And, we managed to get it completely out. But that's the other thing about the farms is there's a huge, disease transport mechanism that if it's an organic grain, that bran layer is just absolutely full of wild yeasts and fungi and spores and all that sort of stuff. So there's a bioremediation thing in there as well, that the smaller the impact, and as you grow it, your own native flora and fauna will adapt to the grain. So.
Great, thank you, Chris. And I guess with that, we're at even more over time. I'm not a very good timekeeper yet. I will work on that. But thank you, everyone, for being so generous with your time. Chris, Samuel, Amy, we really appreciate all the time you put into your presentations and answering questions. Big thank you to Rebecca for keeping things seamless behind the scenes. And of course, to our translators, Adrian and Peter, we really appreciate you even going a bit over time on this as well. What I'll do is I'll be sending out an email with all the resources in the chat and some things that the speakers have talked about soon. And then I'll also send you an email later when the recording is up on our YouTube channel. Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario has a small grains newsletter and a meetup at the end of April. So I'll make sure to share that information in the email, and possibly Rebecca will share that in the chat as well. But yeah, thank you so much. We're just going to put up like a real quick poll if you have time, just to get some feedback on how this went. If you have any more ideas on what you'd like to get a deeper dive into, or what a cool field day you'd like to see around heritage grains, or another webinar on around heritage grains, please feel free to email us. I'll put my email in the chat. And as well, you can reply to the email that I will send to you in the next coming days. I would love to hear, what we can do to see you all at another webinar and field day. Yeah, without further ado, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we hope to see you at another event soon.